my god. Is that the greatest thing you've ever heard?
Welcome to this edition of Sound Off Extra here on the official YouTube channel for the Solomonster Sounds Off podcast, which you can listen to each and every Sunday on the Solomonster.com, Stitcher Radio, and iTunes. I am the Solomonster. I'm here in my hotel room the Monday after WrestleMania 33. It is Monday, April 3rd, 2017. WrestleMania 33, they called it the Ultimate Thrill Ride. That was the tagline heading into the show from Camping World Stadium here in Orlando. Can I just say, having been to a bunch of these stadiums now, this was I believe my sixth WrestleMania in a row going back to Miami in 2012. And the Citrus Bowl, and now they call it Camping World Stadium, it's the Citrus Bowl. It is a terrible stadium. Getting around there was an awful experience. And just the way they have this thing set up, it was maddening. So I would be happy if they just bulldozed that thing to the ground and never had another WrestleMania there again. So no offense to the people of Orlando, but that building is a dump. Now, with that off my chest, this was my sixth Mania. I had the opportunity of being there for the end of the streak and now seemingly the end of an era. The Undertaker has likely wrestled his last match. Now, again, in wrestling, you never say never. But the way they ended this show, we are more likely, I think, to see him in the Hall of Fame before we ever see him wrestle another match. And watching him out there in that main event against Roman Reigns, it's for the best. And honestly, it's probably 4 to 5 years too late. The end of an era match with Triple H and that scene of them and Shawn Michaels hugging on stage, that would have been a fitting end to his career. Either that or the match with CM Punk, where he paid tribute to the Urn and Paul Bearer. Either one of those matches would have been an appropriate finale, I think, to the career of The Undertaker. But he kept on going, and he had the match with Brock, which is when the streak ended, and he looked terrible in that match. He had a bounce-back year at 31, looked a lot better in his match with Bray Wyatt, which wasn't anything special. It was a decent match, and he won. Kind of got his mojo back there. Last year, he had the Hell in a Cell match with Shane McMahon. And then this year, the match with Roman Reigns. So again, I look back and I say to myself, if only he would have just called a stop 4 years ago or 5 years ago, I think it would have been, in a lot of ways, a storybook or more of a storybook ending for that Undertaker character, but they didn't do that. Twitter poll. I did put a poll up on Twitter when the show ended. At last check, the poll is still going. We've already had over 3,300 votes. 77% thumbs up, 23% thumbs down. That is an overwhelmingly positive response to this show. I myself, if you followed any of my tweets, I said as much last night. I enjoyed the show. I would rate the show a solid 7, maybe 7.5 out of 10. I thought that this was easily a better show than last year's WrestleMania in Dallas, which I know is setting the bar very low because that was not a good show, but much better than last year. And in my opinion, the best WrestleMania since 30 in New Orleans. From 30 onward, I would rank them in rank order from best to worst: 30, 33, 31, and then 32. All but WrestleMania 30 have had Roman Reigns in the main event. Back-to-back wins now for Roman Reigns at WrestleMania, and he is slotted for another main event next year if plans hold against Brock Lesnar. Look, they did it with Hogan, they did it with Cena, and now they're doing it with Roman Reigns, where they get a series of WrestleMania main events back-to-back-to-back. The fact is that once Vince McMahon picks his guy, it is very difficult to change his mind. So if you hate the idea of Roman Reigns in the main event of WrestleMania, then it's going to be a pretty miserable next few years for you. So I like the show overall, but it was far from perfect. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that everything was all hunky-dory and this is the greatest WrestleMania of all time, because it was not. It was not a perfect show, for one thing, and this was not obvious just to all of us who were actually sitting there live for 7 straight hours, but to all of the UK fans who were tweeting me at 3 o'clock in the morning, their time, 4 o'clock in the morning, their time, trying to stay up for the end of the show when they had work at 6 a.m. You are better than I am, I can tell you that. This show was way too long. We say this about Raw every single week. 3 hours of Raw every single week is way too long. We know that. 7 hours of WrestleMania is ridiculous. We were out there from 5 p.m. I'm trying to think. I got to my seat. It was right around 5 o'clock because we didn't know when the pre-show matches were going to start. I didn't want to miss the Cruiserweight match. So I was pretty much in my seat, if not at 5 o'clock on the dot, somewhere around then. And so from 5 p.m. until the stroke of midnight, 2 days, technically, this show stretched out over. First time that's ever happened before. The longest WrestleMania of all time. And to their credit, the show for the first, I'd say half of it, it didn't really feel that long. It was breezing by fairly quickly. But then came the second half. And that's when things started to drag. Somebody on Twitter, I didn't, cap their name here. I don't remember who it was. But they said it was like a Tokyo Dome show. But with better production values and crappier matches. Which is probably accurate. Also, the main events on this show largely flopped. Except for the Universal title match with Goldberg and Brock Lesnar. Of all the main events, that's the one that delivered, which I'm sure is quite surprising. But the others really were not very good. I mean, you had about 3 or 4 matches up and down, the bottom half of this card that you could argue were main events or of main event caliber. The 2 championship matches, Undertaker and Roman Reigns. I would throw AJ and Shane McMahon in there. I guess, you know what? I guess if you throw AJ and Shane in there, that actually was a great match. I guess I'm thinking of it more in terms of how they positioned it. Those last matches, Smackdown women's match aside, those last big matches on the show, Goldberg and Brock is really the only one that delivered. So you say to yourself, well, then how can I give this show a thumbs up? How could I call this show a 7 out of 10? Because overall, when it was over, I was entertained. And this is not just, oh, well, you were there. I don't really think this has as much to do with me being there, although I will say, generally you do have more fun when you're at these shows. But I'm trying to look at this from more of an impartial perspective. Forget the fact that I was there live. I was entertained, and I thought that there was enough good, memorable stuff to make this a WrestleMania-worthy show. Now, not among the great WrestleManias of all time, but better than a lot of the ones we've seen, honestly, in the last 10 years. Yes, it was a good show. And the poll seems to reflect that. Now, the stage setup, I would rate that a 10 out of 10. Of all the stages they've ever constructed for WrestleMania, this was the best one. And if the rumors are true and it cost them in the range of $5 million to create, I can believe it. I imagine on television it looked pretty badass, but being there live and in person, it was just gorgeous. I mean, this thing was, you look at it and you're just wowed. And the ramp alone, that ramp, 80 yards long from the top of the ramp down to the ring. 80 yards. It's a long way. So to be there live and see that was actually very cool. And like I said, easily the best stage setup I've ever seen them put together. And they've had some good ones. And we talk a lot, and I hear from you guys a lot. You wish there was more creativity and thought put into these different pay-per-view setups. They're very lackadaisical. They'll just take the television ones and they'll use them for big shows like Rumble and SummerSlam and Survivor Series. And I'm with you on that. I understand if it's a budget issue, maybe they don't do it for every single show. But when you've got your big pay-per-views that are not called WrestleMania, when you have a Royal Rumble, when you have a SummerSlam, you ought to go out and make it unique. And one of the ways that you do that is you get a little creative. I'm not saying you have to spend $5 million to have a set like this. You can't do that in a normal arena setting anyway. But they just don't put any effort into them anymore. So when they do put effort into it, I think they deserve a lot of credit for it. And this one was just tremendous. They also announced a record-breaking attendance, that's what they said, of 75,245 fans. No doubt including the ticket takers, the ushers, the concession stand workers, the security people, and each of Bayley's inflatable tube men. And that still wouldn't explain how they got to that number. And by the way, where did this Bayley Buddies bullshit start? Can somebody tell me this? Byron Saxton, I think it was a couple of months ago maybe, he started calling them this, Bayley Buddies. It irritates the shit out of me every time I hear him say that. He needs to stop. They're not Bailey buddies. More of that marketing BS that I hate. So the pre-show opened with Neville and Austin Aries for the Cruiserweight Championship. The good thing is that the stadium was largely full. Not completely full. There were pockets of people that were still filing in, but it wasn't like last year. Last year was due to more of a ticketing snafu where the whole system went down. People couldn't get in. That's a big stadium in Dallas, and I'm not exaggerating when I tell you the majority of those seats were unfilled when Ryback and Kalisto hit the ring for their pre-show match. And I think that was a championship match as well. It might have been for the Intercontinental title. Maybe the U.S., I don't remember. Didn't have that issue this time. People also seemed to be into this match. They had a good match. I'm sure they could do better. I'm sure they're capable of a lot more. There wasn't anything that was kind of extraordinary, I think, that you haven't seen from these two before, but they work well together. Neville was trapped in the last chancery, and he raked the eyes of Austin Aries. And I think there might have also been a spot after that where Aries got shoved into the ring rope, and the ring rope may have hit his eye, but I know his eyes got raked, and Neville was able to hit the red arrow and get the pin. So Neville retains the Cruiserweight Championship, the first of what I'm sure are going to be many matches between these two. And I have no problem with that at all whatsoever, and I'm sure in the next couple of months we will be looking at Austin Aries as the new Cruiserweight Champion. So continuing this feud is actually a good thing. I have no issue with that at all. Just to give you a sense, I just realized I didn't really mention where I was sitting to give you some perspective. I was not ringside. I did not have floor seats. Better to not have floor seats if you're not in the first 5 rows. Word of advice for anybody looking to go to WrestleMania in the future. So we were up. We weren't in the nosebleeds, but we were kind of, our view of the ring was off to our right a little bit, and the staging was just to our left. I'd like to say that they were pretty decent seats, but then something happened later in the show that I'll get to that made it not so fun. And the thing about these outdoor shows, and I know it's unavoidable, there's no suspended animation, not yet anyway, but when you have an outdoor show to protect from the elements, and it did start raining a little bit during the pre-show, and it went on for about 10 minutes and then it tapered off. But they do that canopy. They have that whole structure above the ring to protect the performers in case it begins to rain. Now, I guess if there was a giant windswept rain, it really wouldn't matter. I think it would be kind of cool, actually, if that happened one day. Unsafe, but it would make for an interesting visual. I actually remember watching a match. It was on one of the Hulk Hogan DVDs they put out many years ago. It was a match, I want to say, in Puerto Rico that he had as the WWF champion against Big John Studd. And they got caught in a monsoon. And I'm not talking about gorilla. I mean, they got caught in a rainstorm. Windswept rain to the point that, like, John Studd was slipping and sliding all over the place. So it's very dangerous. And so they have this giant structure. You know, fuck the fans. At least the wrestlers, I guess, to them are protected. But because of this, you have these giant columns that have to hold up the structure. And so you're going to have obstructed view seats. And I guess in that way, we did have obstructed view because one of those giant columns was right in our face. So that sucked. But not as much as what would happen later on, which I'll get to in a second. Battle Royal, Andre the Giant, 4th Annual Memorial Battle Royal. The big surprise here is that Big Show and Braun Strowman both were eliminated quickly. I thought Strowman pegged as the winner, and I thought there was a chance if it didn't come down to Strowman and Sami Zayn, you know, Sami being the ultimate underdog, and then Sami falls short, Strowman gets the win. Then I thought, okay, well, maybe it comes down to Big Show and Braun. They actually had a pretty good match on Raw not too long ago, and I don't know that people would mind seeing it come down to the two of them. And Big Show apparently has been saying that this is it. This was supposed to be his final match, which I never believed, and I still don't buy into it. Just like the way Mark Henry would always say, I'm not going to let Vince talk me into a new contract, and inevitably he did. 3 years now. So Big Show is dumped rather unceremoniously, which tells me, again, there's no way Big Show's career is ending like that, nor should it. Nor should it. But Braun Strowman being dumped out when he was, was very surprising to me and very disappointing. But it surprised people. Maybe they were going for the shock factor. I don't know. Killian Dane, the former Big Damo, he is part of the Sanity faction in NXT. He was in the Battle Royal. And actually, he had a pretty good showing. He was in there right up until almost the very end. And if I remember correctly, I don't have this in my notes, but I believe it was Sami Zayn that he eliminated. I think Killian Dane eliminated Sami Zayn, and the people were not at all happy about that when Sami got dumped out. I think the Chinese guy, the first ever Chinese recruit at the Performance Center, Tian Bing, or Tian Bing, I believe is his name. He was supposed to be in the Battle Royal. From where I was sitting, even up on the screens, you got 25 guys in there. I couldn't even tell. I mean, the guy hasn't even debuted on TV yet, so I don't even know what he looks like. I know he's Chinese. That's about all I know. But he was in there somewhere, supposedly. I didn't see him. Mojo Rawley, who found himself in the unfortunate position of being part of a tag team where his tag team partner was injured and was going to be on the shelf for quite some time. It would have been very easy for Mojo to be taken off TV. It would have been very easy for Mojo to be lost in the shuffle, kind of in purgatory for 6 months or 9 months, however long it takes for Zack Ryder to get back. And instead, they've given him a chance. They've given him a chance to shine. He has shined numerous times on Talking Smack. I've learned a lot about him through listening to him talk about his past and kind of, who he is. We got to learn more about who Mojo Rawley is. He's a likable guy. And he's gotten, ample TV time as a singles performer on Smackdown. Now, I'd like to think that they were giving him the win here because they have some big plans in 2017 for Mojo Rawley. I don't know that they do. It was very obvious to me the only reason Mojo got the win here was because of his friend, Rob Gronkowski from the New England Patriots. Gronk is, very good friends with Mojo. I don't know if they ever played together in the NFL, but I think that's probably how they met because Mojo did play in the NFL for a time. But very good friends, and Gronk is a big wrestling fan, big WWE fan, but he's also been spotted in the crowd at Full Sail during NXT shows, rooting on Mojo. Anyway, he was there in the front row. So I guess this was their celebrity involvement for this year since Shaq pulled out. Gronk is in the front row, and of all people to go up to him, Jinder Mahal. So Jinder Mahal goes up to Gronk, and he grabs a cup of what I hope was water, and splashes it right in Gronkowski's face. I know myself how that feels after this weekend and my little encounter with the headbangers. Anyway, he splashes Gronk right in the face with the drink, and this was hilarious. Now, maybe I lost something in translation here because I wasn't watching the TV version, but I was looking up at the screen when it happened. He comes over the barricade, and a female security person rushes over to stop him. And at first I thought maybe it's all part of the act. They're going to hold him back, but he's going to break through anyway and go in the ring. But then they kind of cut the camera away, and I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute. She probably has no idea who this guy is, and even if she does, she has no idea that he's supposed to be part of the show. Nobody briefed her. Nobody smartened her up. And I'm watching this, and I could see other people coming over and kind of telling her, no, as part of the show. So yeah, it seems like nobody briefed this woman that he was going to hop over the barricade, and that was kind of ridiculous. This big moment could have been ruined. Could you imagine, if she didn't know who he was, and he comes over and he's a large man. He comes over the barricade in the middle of the show. They whip out their taser. They start tasing Gronkowski. I mean, they would have gotten a lot of good publicity for it, just not the kind they were looking for. So they clear it. They say it's fine. He comes in. And he took out Jinder with the old hacksaw Jim Duggan football tackle. That's this big Sports Center moment they were looking for. I guess they got what they wanted out of it, but it became very obvious at that point. The only reason Mojo even was in the final mix in this Battle Royal was because of Gronkowski. They wanted to have their moment with him. Look, at the end of the day, if they prove me wrong and they go and they push Mojo and he shows improvement and in 6 months or 9 months from now he's a big star on the SmackDown side, then great, fantastic. I don't think that will be the case. But we'll see. But yes, he did win the Battle Royal and people were happy. In the building, it's not like he got booed or people were disgusted. They actually cheered. It was one of those moments, I guess, that people kind of get into, but there was no wholesale rejection of it or anything just because someone like Sami didn't win. They were happy for Mojo. Now, there was one match that was originally supposed to be on the pre-show that got moved back onto the main card. Becky Lynch even went on Twitter and thanked the fans for speaking out. Fans were outraged when the Smackdown Women's Championship match was bumped to the pre-show. So it got bumped to the main card. Now, in doing so, that there had to be a match that was going to have to get bumped to the pre-show, and that match turned out to be the Dean Ambrose-Baron Corbin match for the Intercontinental Championship. Not the first time the Intercontinental title has been defended on the pre-show. I know it happened at least once before. I want to say WrestleMania 29. I believe it was The Miz and Bad News Barrett, which I guess would have had to have been when Miz was a babyface. So this is not the first time it's happened. They had a very basic match. There was really nothing special about it. Corbin got laid out by Dirty Deeds out of nowhere and pinned. And Dean Ambrose retains the Intercontinental Championship. And actually, there were quite a few finishes like that came out of nowhere. Very sudden finishes on this card. This was not the only one. So the match was just kind of there. There really was nothing special about it. So then we have WrestleMania itself. New Day comes out dressed up as Final Fantasy characters. I only know this because there were some people sitting in my section who made reference to Final Fantasy. I don't play Final Fantasy. I wouldn't know what the fuck a Final Fantasy character looks like. But there you have it. They were dressed up as characters from the game. I guess WWE is doing a promotion, or they're running ads on WWE programming for some new game, and so that's the connection there. Thankfully, New Day was kept to a minimum. I was worried we were going to see comedy segment after comedy segment up and down this show with them, but really, it was the opening segment where they sort of introduced WrestleMania. And unless you guys saw something on TV that was not shown to us in the stadium, and I think we pretty much saw everything, I think besides this one, it was just the Hardys segment and the attendance announcement that they did later on. So New Day being kept to a minimum, I think, was a good thing. They did some ha-ha comedy at the beginning, and then they got the hell out of there, so they didn't overstay their welcome. Okay, so I had to stop there for a second. We had some noise coming from the cleaning person outside, but that's been taken care of. So, we have Shane McMahon and AJ Styles as the opening contest at WrestleMania. I don't know anybody personally who would have predicted this. Maybe there's someone out there who did. If they did, more power to them. I certainly didn't expect them to open the show. And there were people who were very upset. I'm checking Twitter, and people were outraged, and I just kind of laughed at it. It's like, there is something to be said for the old saying, if you're not last, you're first, or if you're not last, you want to be first. And again, there is some truth to that people, now maybe not on a 7-hour show by the end, people may not remember much about this match, but at the very beginning of the show, if you go out there and have a great match, and if you're in the main event and you have a great match, people are going to remember that. It's the stuff in the middle, unless it's really, really good, that people tend to either overlook or maybe not look back on so fondly. So, not a bad position to be in, because on a match, look, here's my argument for why this wasn't a bad thing. I think we all agree AJ Styles is a main event performer in any promotion on any show. We know what this guy is capable of. He should have been in the WrestleMania or one of the WrestleMania main events, but he was not. AJ Styles is going to go out there and have a great match no matter what. The problem is when you have a show as long as this one, 13 matches, 14 matches, whatever the final number was, that's a lot of freaking matches. So to put AJ and Shane on, let's say, as match number 6 in the middle of the show, if you gave me the option of opening the show or being number 6 or number 7 or number 8 out of 14, I'm going to take number 1. That's what I would do. So it's actually not a bad position for them to be in. And they went out there and they killed it. They had a great match. One of the best matches on the show last night. If you were to turn around to me and say, Solomonster, they had the best match, I wouldn't argue. I'd say, okay, yeah, I could see that. I might go with, I personally may go with the Universal title match, but that was also a very different kind of match. That was a much shorter match, and so it's hard to judge what was the better match. It depends what you were expecting out of it. If you were expecting a technical classic out of AJ and Shane, you didn't get that here. Shane tried. He busted out some like MMA moves, and he was doing some counters. He did an armbar at one point. He had the Muay Thai stuff that they love to talk about on TV. So he clearly was studying some new moves and wanted to incorporate some of that stuff into the match. But it was a collection of big moves. It was a collection of big spots and big moments. But I thought they built to it well, and the people, I could tell you, in the stadium were into this. It was getting, this is awesome chants by the end, and which I know is not necessarily indicative of anything. People chant that all the time. But the point is, the match was very well received by the audience. I thought they had a great match. I'm not going to put that all on AJ because Shane, I think, held his own. He looked a little gassed to me as the night or as the match went on, but he held his own. And it wasn't like AJ was out there wrestling a freaking broomstick. Both guys did what they could. Shane did everything he could. And AJ worked within what he was given. And I thought they both knocked it out of the park. And in the end, we saw Shane McMahon kick out of a Styles Clash. Now, I can't remember if the elbow off the top came before or after. It actually might have come before. There was a top rope elbow drop from Shane that missed. He crashed through the announce table. So basically the spot they did on Smackdown, only this time he didn't hit it. But then after that, I think it was, Shane kicked out of a Styles Clash. Now, I know it wasn't the best looking Styles Clash AJ's ever done, but I kind of shook my head at that because that's a move that should be protected. It's a move that has legitimately crippled people. Because if you don't take it the right way, the margin for error is very, very thin. That's a match, or a move rather, that should be protected. And for Shane McMahon, of all people, to kick out of the Styles Clash, I didn't like that. So they did some other stuff. Shane did a coast to coast. AJ was able to kick out of that. Shane busted out a shooting star press and missed. He crashed and burned, and then AJ hit the phenomenal forearm and got the pin. Again, great match and a hot start to WrestleMania. Hats off to both guys. Kevin Owens and Chris Jericho up next for the United States Championship. Not surprisingly, they had a good match, although I enjoyed AJ and Shane better. But they still had a good match. Kevin Owens did win the U.S. title, which I think, I know I predicted, a lot of you probably predicted the same thing. And even not knowing that Jericho was going to be going away soon after WrestleMania, if Jericho was going to stick around for 6 months, I still think I would have had Owens pegged to win the title because I just don't see the upside in keeping the championship on Jericho. He's barely even defending the thing. Kevin Owens has more to gain by having that championship than Jericho does. But he hit the pop-up powerbomb on Jericho at one point. I believe Jericho kicked out. There was a code breaker in here. Actually, that was one of the best spots of the entire match because Jericho hits a code breaker. And Owens is close enough to the ropes where, and I even leaned over to, I think it was Noah, and I said, watch, he's going to grab the bottom rope. He didn't grab the bottom rope. Kevin Owens took his, I believe his index finger, and put his finger on the rope. And that obviously constitutes a rope break, but everybody laughed. They thought it was a funny moment. In the end, Owens hit the power bomb on the apron, rolled Jericho inside and got the pin. There were some people live who were kind of caught off by that, caught off guard. I don't know why they would have been because we've seen him lay people out and put them out on the injured list with that move. And so I figured it was the finish, and it was. But I don't know. There were some people surprised by it. Again, I don't really understand why. Good match. Kevin Owens is now the United States champion. It is a step down from being the Universal champion, but look, he's not the champ anymore. He had a nice run in terms of length. I wouldn't call it a nice reign in terms of him being booked to be the strongest champion. It really wasn't until his last month that Kevin Owens, I thought, really came into his own as a kind of a sick heel, very much like the Kevin Owens we saw in NXT. Not a comedy guy who's doing Abbott and Costello comedy routines and you're my best friend and all that kind of stuff. So in terms of how long he had the championship for, he had it longer than I thought he would. I wouldn't call it exactly the strongest championship run I've ever seen. Let's hope he has more luck with the U.S. title. We had the Raw Women's Championship Fatal 4-Way Elimination match. Bayley defending against Charlotte, Sasha Banks, and Nia Jax. Now, I made mention earlier of our seats. We technically had obstructed view seats because of one of the columns that was blocking our view. And so I was looking up a lot at the screens anyway. But then when the women's match started, I don't know why, I don't know what changed. They had this, as part of the rig, this set of lights that was so bright and it was shining in everyone's face to to the point that everybody was shielding their eyes. They're looking away. They're looking up at the screens. And I don't know how it came across on television, but you probably heard chants of "we can't see" or "we can't see shit." And it wasn't just on our side. Apparently, it was on the other side of the stadium as well. The reason for that was because of that dumb light. And so we figured if we protest loud enough, they'll turn the friggin' lights out. I mean, they have enough lights up there. It's not like we're not going to be able to see. But they didn't do anything. They didn't change anything. And so I basically watched the screens for the rest of the show, which was fine. I mean, whatever, right? It's all part of the experience, right, about being there. But it's still bullshit. Like, there's no reason for those lights to be shining in people's faces. The first 2 matches, we didn't have that issue. And it sucks, too, because these women are out there having a match, and it could have been anybody out there having a match, and you guys are at home watching on TV trying to enjoy the show, and you're kind of wondering, okay, how's the crowd going to react? And now you've got half the crowd, chanting, "we can't see shit." It's unnecessary. And people are paying a lot of money for these seats. Look, I paid a lot of money for my seat. I didn't pay nearly as much as the people did on the floor. But I paid, a few $100s for my ticket. It's ridiculous that I have to sit there and look up at the screens, not because I want to, but because I have a fucking light shining in my face that wasn't there for the first 4 matches. So they need to be a little more sensitive, I think. I understand they have this giant structure and they have things set up a certain way, but they have to be more sensitive to the people in the stadium for all the money we're paying for these tickets. That's just unacceptable. So, as for the match itself, my thought in watching this, and it was really came through to me when Nia got pinned, reminded me a lot of WrestleMania 16. Back in 2000, they had that fatal 4-way, a McMahon in every corner. It was Rock, Triple H, Mick Foley, and The Big Show. And I looked at this as like a WrestleMania 16 type of scenario where you have a fatal 4-way elimination match for the championship, and Nia Jax is in the role of The Big Show, somebody who gets added to the match late, unnecessarily. And I said this before. I was hoping that Dana Brooke would not just be added for the sake of being added. I didn't want them to add Nia Jax because I didn't think she really added anything to the equation here. This was going to be perfectly fine with Charlotte, Sasha, and Bayley. And the fact is, these 3 women, you may be sick to death of them, but these 3 women are the 3 that have been feuding for months. So for this to have been a triple threat match, to me, would have been perfectly fine. But they added Nia, and I thought, okay, well, they're adding Nia. There must be a reason for it. Nope. Absolutely not. The only reason I guess they added Nia Jax, who was eliminated about 2 minutes into this thing, just like Big Show at WrestleMania 16, which is why I made that comparison. Big Show was not in there for very long. Neither was she. There was no point to even being in the match, other than we want to make sure she gets on the card and has her WrestleMania moment. I suspect that Nia Jax will have other opportunities to have WrestleMania moments, and I'm sure it was a very nice moment for her. I'm just saying she had no real business being in this match. She added nothing to the match. What they got out of it was a recreation of the Shield triple powerbomb spot. Maybe that was the only reason they had her in there. We had Charlotte, Sasha, and Becky or Bayley working together to triple powerbomb Nia. They all laid on top of her, and they pinned her. So they got her out of the match early, which probably was for the best, because it was a better match probably for her being gone early. Charlotte sent Sasha headfirst into one of the turnbuckles a few minutes later, pinned her. So, I don't know, Charlotte seems to have Sasha's number. So now it came down to Charlotte and Bayley, which I predicted it would, although my prediction was that Charlotte would win the championship. In fact, she did not win the championship. Bayley retained her Raw Women's title by using a Randy Savage elbow to pin Charlotte. Again, one of those sudden finishes I mentioned earlier. And so the crowd was, they were happy for Bayley. They were happy that Bayley won. I didn't feel it got a huge reaction because people were just kind of shocked. They weren't expecting that to be the finish. I actually have no problem. I have 0 issues with her using the Macho Man elbow as a finish, even though she's going to wreck her hip after a while if she keeps doing it. The belly-to-belly suplex is a lot safer, but it's also pretty lame. Let's be honest. The belly-to-belly as a finish is a pretty lame move. So if she wants to adopt the elbow, and I know she's a big Macho Man fan, you could even tell the way she does her outfit with the tassels, it's clearly modeled after Randy Savage, then more power to her. But they probably should have established this as a finish before the pay-per-view so that people might have actually bought into it as a finish. Charlotte, I have to give her a shout out to because she used a corkscrew moonsault off the top rope to the floor at one point. Absolutely crazy. And she was so happy when she landed this move. She pumped her fists right after. It looked awesome. She also looked like Neville out there. I'm watching her flying through the air like that, and I'm just thinking to myself, she's like Neville. If Neville had hair extensions and a father who paid $20,000 a month in alimony, she would be Neville. We had no Howard Finkel for the Hall of Fame introductions, which was very sad. Another WrestleMania streak, dead. Fink just posted about 2 days ago on Twitter. He celebrated his 37-year anniversary as a full-time employee for World Wrestling Entertainment. So he's still there. He's still with the company. Hopefully it's not a health issue that may have prevented him from being there. If you remember Dallas last year, I don't know how widely this was reported, but I reported it in my WrestleMania review because I was there in the stadium, and when the lights went out and the Hall of Fame segment was over, Finkel needed to be helped out of the... And I don't mean helped out like climbing through the ropes, let's help him down gently. Like, he couldn't get out of the ring. He's gained a lot of weight. And if you watched Legends House a number of years back on the network, you could tell he's gained a lot of weight. And although I don't know that that's the reason he was taken off TV all those years ago. I mean, it's ridiculous how early they took him off television as the ring announcer. It was after that. I feel like he put on a lot more weight. Point is, he got stuck under the ropes trying to get out of the ring. I mean, I'm not even exaggerating. That I saw with my own two eyes. That's what happened. And a bunch of people were out there trying to help kind of drag him out of the ring. It was really sad. So again, total speculation on my part. Why otherwise would he not have been there? I'm just hoping it's not a health issue, and hopefully everything is okay with the Fink. We had Anderson and Gallows, Cesaro and Sheamus, and Cass and Enzo in a triple threat ladder match for the Raw Tag Team titles. Cass and Enzo were super over when they came out. This was their first WrestleMania. They debuted on the main roster the night after WrestleMania last year. And like I said, they came out here and people went nuts. They were super over until the Hardys showed up. And once that happened, the fans could not have cared less for them or anybody else in this match. Nobody except Matt and Jeff. So I kind of felt bad for them because my prediction going into this was that Cass and Enzo were going to win the tag team titles because they've always been the bridesmaid and never the bride, right? In NXT, they were there for a while. They never, not even one time, as popular as they were, they never won the tag team titles. They were always foiled. And ever since they joined the main roster, it's only been a year, but they have not won the tag team titles. And so I figured maybe they've been waiting for this moment. WrestleMania, they're going to give them their big moment. They're going to finally win the big one. Nope. They're going to have to wait for another day because it didn't happen here either. But I felt bad because they were easily the most popular team in this match, and then they weren't only a few minutes later. Everything, all of them, were just completely overshadowed by the Hardy Boys' return. New Day came out. I actually like the way they set this up. So New Day came out in their gear, making you think they're going to add themselves to this match and make it a fatal four-way. And they teased it, and they teased it, and then the Hardys' old WWF music hit, and the place exploded. Now, imagine if this was on Raw tonight, if they saved it for like a regular building, 15, 20,000 people. You would have seen the hard camera shaking, right? In a stadium this big, you're not going to see that. But I can tell you being there live, I don't know how it came across on TV, because sometimes when you're outdoors in a big stadium, sound goes up. All of that is true, but the place went nuts. I can tell you that. People were going out of their minds. And look, Matt has the hair and he still does the whole delete thing. So in a way, he kind of is playing the broken gimmick, but it was very obvious, coming out to that music and Jeff, no weird face paint, just basically looking like Jeff. They were out there as Team Extreme. They were out there as Matt and Jeff Hardy. They were not out there as Broken Matt. They were not out there as Brother Nero. And that's fine. And I was having a conversation with Noah about this in terms of the music. I had no problem with them coming out to their old music because you got to remember, there's a lot of fans in WWE who know Matt Hardy and Jeff Hardy but don't know of them from TNA. And they have no idea about any of the broken stuff. And you want that big moment where as soon as the music hits, people recognize it and they react to it. So you're not going to have Rebby come out and start playing a piano. That's just not going to happen. So them coming out to the old music and kind of being the old Hardys on night one is fine, and I understand that. The key is going to be what happens tonight on Raw. If they come out there and cut a promo, are they cutting a promo as Matt and Jeff, or are they working more of the broken stuff into it? I'm very curious to see what happens, because I've seen both things. They did an interview with WWE.com where they're basically just Matt and Jeff Hardy, but they also did a quick 10-second little promo thing where they were talking about deleting and obsoleting and like they're working little elements and pieces of it, I feel like, into things without actually playing the gimmick because of, Anthem, threatening to sue and just being, dicks about the whole thing. So they came out and people went wild, and there really was only one outcome to this once they were added to the match, and that was, of course, the Hardys winning. How are you going to bring the Hardys back and have them get that kind of reaction and then have Anderson and Gallows win, or even Cass and Enzo? At that point, there was no way they could have won the belts because, yeah, they would have gotten some cheers, but it would have weakened whatever reaction they ultimately would have gotten. The Hardys were going to weaken the reaction to everybody else no matter what. The only outcome at that point was that the Hardys win the titles, and that's exactly what happened. It was a decent match. By no means the best ladder match I've ever seen at WrestleMania. The big spot that it built to was Jeff Hardy, of course. Just like the old days, there's Jeff Hardy at WrestleMania climbing to the very top of a ladder. There was a ladder bridge outside. Sheamus, was it Sheamus and Cesaro? Might have been Sheamus and someone else, but they were laid out on the ladders. And Jeff came off with a swanton. I'm going to say Cesaro was on one of the ladders, but maybe it was someone else. That ladder broke. The other ladder did not break. And I guess it was Sheamus just kind of rolled off. But it was still a very cool spot. Matt was the one who ultimately climbed up and pulled the belts down. A very, very cool moment. People went nuts for these guys. And so the expedition for gold has come full circle. They've been doing this gimmick for a few months now where they not only were the TNA Tag Team Champions, but they were traveling to different independent promotions, and even, I think, the Crash promotion in Mexico, they won their tag team titles. Then they won the Ring of Honor tag team titles after they left TNA. And in fact, on Saturday, they lost the Ring of Honor tag team titles in a ladder match to the Young Bucks. Then they show up the next night at WrestleMania in front of, however many thousands of people, and they win the Raw tag team titles. So quite the weekend for Matt and Jeff Hardy. But I'm happy to see them back. I do hope they can use the broken gimmick and work something out at some point because, part of the reason that Matt, at least, I don't know about Jeff. I mean, Jeff's a crazy man, but Jeff, up until he broke his leg in that dirt bike accident a couple years ago, Jeff Hardy had never suffered a serious injury in his entire career. He had never had major surgery. He may not have had surgery of any kind. And I think of all the stunts that Jeff Hardy has pulled over the years, all the risks that this guy has taken. That's pretty impressive. The guy's like Gumby. Matt Hardy, on the other hand, he hasn't been so fortunate. He's had a whole bunch of different injuries. And so for him, at least, one of the reasons, if not the biggest reason, that he burned out was the toll that the travel and just everything was taking on his body. Doing the broken stuff allowed him a creative outlet to kind of get himself over and stay relevant and stay popular without having to put his body through all of the kind of abuse that he used to in all those ladder matches. Now they're back in WWE, and I hope they don't just put them in ladder matches every few months, or else they may end up broken, but not in a broken way I think that most fans would be hoping for. So for their sake, I hope that doesn't happen. We had John Cena and Nikki Bella against The Miz and Maurice, with Al Roker as the guest ring announcer. Al Roker soundly booed. That put a smile on my face. Now, I knew going into this match, there were people tweeting me, what do you think of the match now? You talked it up so much. First of all, I don't understand. There were some people, not a lot, there were some people who had issue with me praising, the build to this match as though I kind of offended them in some great way. First of all, number one, fuck off. Number two, I knew going into this that the build-up for this match would end up being better than the match itself. And unfortunately, I was right. I was hoping I was wrong. But the match was nothing special. The build-up is what made me interested in this whole thing. And sometimes, hey, it's pro wrestling. It's all about stories, right? The reason they call them storylines. I bought into this storyline. I was entertained by it. I enjoyed it. It was some comedy from WWE that I actually found funny. because a lot of their comedy is hit or miss, and I'm being kind. I'm being very generous when I say that. But this was like laugh out loud stuff, so I had thoroughly been enjoying the build up to the match. So I knew full well going in, this can't possibly live up to how entertaining and invested in the build up that I have been in this thing. I did want to see Maurice. I was very curious because Maurice, of course, is a former Divas champion. I don't remember Maurice being bad. She was pretty good. And Maurice was always great when it came to like the facial expressions and just the way she carried herself. She was a star. And we haven't seen her wrestle in many, many years. So I actually was very curious to see her in there doing moves and stuff. And if I had one big complaint about this, is that we barely got to see any of her. We did not get nearly enough Maurice in this match. And I'm not really sure exactly why her role was limited here, but it was. So they had a very basic match, and John Cena was beaten down and beaten down. The Miz was cheered like a babyface. And John Cena made the hot tag to Nikki Bella. And so she ran wild, and in the end, they each hit their big moves. He hit the Attitude Adjustment on Miz. She hit the TKO on Maurice. They got double pins, and so John Cena and Nikki Bella are victorious. It would have been nice. Now, I predicted that they would win. I said on the prediction show that we did on Saturday at the radio station, I said, you know, my heart says Miz and Maurice, but my head tells me Cena and Nikki. So Cena and Nikki did win. But it would have been nice for Miz to get the win because I do feel that he has top heel potential on that SmackDown brand. And with Cena going away and Nikki possibly going away, they still could have done what they did after this match, even if they would have lost. It would not have hurt that whole angle at all. But they wanted to go, I guess, for the happy ending, and so Miz and Maurice soundly defeated here in this match. And then came the big proposal. We've been talking about this for weeks now. There have been rumors that they're going to do a proposal at WrestleMania. It's like the modern-day Macho Man and Liz, only they're not. So Cena grabs a microphone. He talks about how, you know, a year ago you broke your neck. And I remember you being wheeled in for surgery and they gave you some medicine and you were going to be groggy. And right before you got knocked out, you know, I asked you, can you hear me? And you said yes. And I said, I have one question. Do you know that one day I'm going to marry you? And she said yes. The idea being that she was being put under for surgery. And so when you wake up, you're not going to remember a thing. So she said yes. So Cena goes, I just need you to say yes one more time. And he got on his knee. He said, I've been waiting so long to ask you this question. And there were, you know, people in the crowd. It was a mixture of cheers and boos. People actually reacted to this a lot better than I thought they would. I thought that they were just going to boo this guy out of the building. This guy's going to be on bended knee proposing, even if it is a fake proposal, because I'm sure that he already proposed to her weeks or months ago. But here he is on his knee, and everyone's going to just boo this guy right out of the building. But they didn't. I mean, they booed him out of the building when he came out. They told him he sucks. But I actually thought the crowd was more respectful than I expected them to be of this angle here. So, of course, she accepted, and she kissed him, and they hugged, and, you know, it brings a tear to a glass eye. I actually, in all seriousness, thought that this was tremendous. I thought that this was just a great angle. I thought it was one of those, you know, WrestleMania moments they love to talk about so much. Again, I'm not putting it on the same level of what we saw years and years ago with Savage and Liz, but look, you got to understand something. To a lot of newer fans and a lot of younger fans, you know, WrestleMania 7 in 1991, I wasn't even 10 years old at that point, or I was just about to turn 10. So I was a kid, and I still have fond memories of that whole thing. Sherry kicking Savage's ass and you know, Elizabeth running down. So again, this wasn't the proposal. This was the Savage Elizabeth reunion that I'm talking about here. But that was a very memorable WrestleMania moment. And so to this new generation of fans and all the little Cena fans out there, all the little brats who love to cheer for John Cena, this is something that they will remember for years to come. And you could say that that's really sad and that's really terrible. But it made for a great moment. I thought it was very well done. I thought, you know, the little story he told, whether it's bullshit or not, I don't know. But I thought it was actually very, very well done. Look, you're not gonna find me in the crowd crying over a moment like this. You're more likely to find me getting emotional over what we saw at the end of the show than something like this. But I thought this was very well done. Seth Rollins and Triple H in a non-sanctioned match. This was a really long match, and it felt it. This was the point in the show where you started to really feel like, okay, what time is it here? How many matches do we got left? I'm looking at my watch. I'm looking at my phone. God, this show was long. So I wasn't a fan of the length of this match. I felt it dragged a lot. It really dragged a lot for the first half or so. And then finally, last, 5, 6, 7 minutes, things picked up pretty good. Rollins kicked out of a pedigree. Triple H kicked out of a Phoenix Splash. Stephanie McMahon was out there with her husband. She tried to get involved a few different times. Now, there was a table that was set up outside the ring. I believe Triple H set that table up at the very beginning, but I just remember when the match was over, I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute, where did that table come from? When was it set up? But I think Triple H set it up early in the match. If I had one big criticism besides the length of this match, this is an unsanctioned match. I know it's not like billed as a hardcore match where you just, you bring a barrel of weapons in right away, but still, it's an unsanctioned match. For an unsanctioned match, like a street fight, this was awfully boring for the first half or so. And then finally, he starts to work on the knee, which is always exciting. Although here, obviously, psychologically, it made sense to go work on this guy's knee because he was out with a knee injury. But my God, I mean, you think about a non-sanctioned match or a personal vendetta, a street fight between these two guys. It's so personal between these two for so many months. And they're just out there having a match. I didn't like that. I was ready for violence, and it took way too long to get me my violence. So that I didn't like. What I did like was the big bump that Stephanie took at the end. She's on the apron. Triple H accidentally bumps his wife off the apron, and she crashes through a table. Now, how many times have we talked about Stephanie McMahon never getting her comeuppance? And I know what people are going to say. I know exactly what people are going to say. Well, it was Triple H who did it. Triple H got to be the one to actually put Stephanie through a table. That should have been Sami Zayn, or that should have been someone else. True. I wish it was. But still, Stephanie took a bump. Be happy. Triple H turns around, walks right into a pedigree. He gets laid out by his own move and pinned. Because we all know, Triple H... Now, Rollins already kicked out of the move in the match. This is Triple H's move. He ain't kicking out of his own move. If anyone's going to put over Triple H's move, it's going to be Triple H. And Rollins got the pin. People cheered. They were very happy to see Seth Rollins pick up a big win. I was happy for him that he wasn't hurt enough to miss his second WrestleMania because that would have been pretty shitty. So in the end, they gave us a good match. I just thought it was way too long and way too dull early on for what was supposed to be this non-sanctioned match where Triple H and really both of them could have gone out there and grabbed anything and done anything, and it just didn't rise up to that level until the very end. We had Bray Wyatt and Randy Orton for the WWE Championship. This is the one on this show that I just did not agree with at all. This was, I'll be honest with you, I thought everything about this sucked. I thought the match sucked. I thought the finish sucked. I thought the special effects with the hamburger helper that they were showing on the mat or whatever the hell that was supposed to be, I guess the maggots or whatever, I thought that was stupid. I guess, look, they're trying something different, but it was dumb, and it sure as hell didn't help Bray Wyatt in the end, now did it? They had a boring match. Crowd was tired. We were exhausted. I mean, we were just tired by that point. But Randy Orton, out of nowhere, RKO, 1, 2, 3. People weren't ready for it. Another one of these out of nowhere finishes. And people weren't really too thrilled about it either, at least not the people in my section. And I don't know where Bray Wyatt goes from here. Because to me, I'm now done with this feud. I enjoyed the Orton-Wyatt family stuff for a while. Until I felt like it jumped the shark, and then I didn't. And now that Orton just went out there and beat him for the championship, that's it. What's left to see? Unless Bray is going to rebuild the Wyatt family with new people now and go back after the championship, I just don't see what the point is. So it's kind of like, thanks for coming, Bray Wyatt. You had your month or month and a half with the championship. I don't see... I just don't see what purpose it serves, other than maybe, and this might be the one silver lining in all this, if AJ Styles is staying put on SmackDown and not being drafted to Raw, then, the upside is that this would seem to give us Randy Orton and AJ Styles as the next program. I mean, who else is AJ going to feud with? We've seen AJ and Cena. They didn't have anybody for AJ Styles to the point that they had to have Shane McMahon wrestle him at WrestleMania, the commissioner of the show. So, if he stays as a heel and he stays on SmackDown, who else is there for AJ Styles to go after? The guy should be in main events wrestling for the championship. Randy Orton is now the champion. We saw them have one match on TV a few weeks ago that was good. Not nearly as good as I know the two of them can have. And now we may be able to get a couple of pay-per-view matches out of them. And I think they could go out there, and if Orton's motivated to go out there and have a great match, they could have a great match. That's the one little silver lining in all this. But the fact that they would take the championship off Bray Wyatt here and give it to Randy Orton, I think, was incredibly stupid. I just thought that was so dumb. And the fact that they were out there having a boring match didn't help matters. This match that came next was anything but boring. Goldberg and Brock Lesnar for the Universal Championship. You talk about the tale of two cities. These two championship matches right here, that's the story. You have Randy Orton and Bray Wyatt out there having a boring match with a bad finish. Here you have Goldberg and Brock Lesnar going out there for the other championship, having a short match that was exactly the length it should have been, that was smash mouth from start to finish, that had people chanting, "This is awesome, holy shit," with the correct finish. This was a perfect match. This match was exactly what it needed to be, and it got over great with the people inside the stadium. Now, I whipped out the stopwatch before it started. I wanted to clock this one. I clocked it at 4 minutes and 46 seconds. So, we got more than the 90 seconds or whatever it was back at Survivor Series, but we didn't have to see Goldberg and Brock out there for 10 or 15 minutes. Look, if they had a good 10-minute match, I wouldn't have minded. I think they probably could have gone a few more minutes if they wanted to, and still it would have been a good match. But you know what? Just under 5 minutes, they went out there, they did exactly what they had to do. Brock immediately gives him two or three German suplexes. Goldberg no-sells it, pops right back up, out of nowhere, boom, spear. That got people's attention. And that's what they had to do. They had to go out there and get people's attention. And they got my attention. Then they go outside the ring. Goldberg spears Lesnar through the barricades. And it looked great, too. Like, up on the screen, I'm watching this, and it looks like these things, the barricade just exploded with these two behemoths crashing through it. So they end up back in the ring. Goldberg is going to finish him off here. He's going to give him the jackhammer, which he does. He goes for the pin. Lesnar kicks out. Now, what did I say when I talked about this match on the Sound Off? I said they can go out there and do the exact same thing that they did at Survivor Series, but this time have Lesnar kick out. Because it would be easy for people to think, oh my God, they're not going to do the same finish twice. And then just when he kicks out, you get that great reaction from them. And that's basically what they did here. It wasn't a carbon copy of what they did at Survivor Series, but he basically went to go for the early finish. Lesnar kicked out. The people cheered. Lesnar was the real babyface here in this match. There were a lot of boos. It's not like the entire stadium was against Goldberg, but there were way more Brock fans, or at least they were more vocal than the Goldberg fans were. So they were very happy when he kicked out. Lesnar hit about 10 German suplexes total. Goldberg took a lot more suplexes than I thought he would. And that's a big boy to be throwing around there. That's a 50-year-old body getting tossed back and forth and left and right. The thing that made me go, holy shit, and that I was just blown away by, was when Goldberg went for the spear. And he went for the spear, and Lesnar leapfrogged him. He jumped into the air, cleared Goldberg, and Goldberg hit the turnbuckle. Now that's some pretty scary athleticism right there from Brock Lesnar. And the people went nuts for that. So you got Goldberg up for the F5, hit the F5, all it took was one, and he rolled him over, he got the pin, and Brock Lesnar, for the very first time now, is WWE Universal Champion. He is back. The Conqueror is back, which means no championship matches on house shows. I believe this is the first and only clean loss of Goldberg's entire career. I was trying to think, and I could not remember a single instance before this of him being pinned or being made to submit on television without some sort of interference or some kind of screwjob finish, going back to when he debuted on TV in WCW. So if you could think of one, let me know. But every single match that he lost that I could think of, there was some kind of funny business or interference, or he was tasered, or the referee called for the bell, or some kind of shenanigans that were going on. So this may well have been the first clean loss of Bill Goldberg's career, and I just can't say enough good things about this match. It was quick. There wasn't really a whole lot to it, but these guys did exactly what they had to do, and I just have nothing but positive things to say about it. It was just exciting from bell to bell, and it didn't overstay its welcome like a lot of other stuff on this show. So let's see what happens tonight on Raw. I mean, they could always shock people, I suppose, by having Brock get goaded into a championship defense against somebody new, like a Balor or Strowman or something like that. I would like to see them build to a Braun Strowman-Brock Lesnar match at SummerSlam in Brooklyn. When I did my prediction show for 2017 back at the beginning of January, I said my prediction for SummerSlam was Brock and Braun Strowman. And I feel no differently now than I did then. And I think whether it's for the championship or not, that's a big feature attraction. That's a big money match to do at SummerSlam, And of course, with Roman Reigns, it's coming. We have the battle of the only two men to have defeated The Undertaker at WrestleMania. I'm sure that'll be the promo line for WrestleMania 34 next year. Six-pack challenge for the SmackDown Women's Championship. Alexa Bliss, Naomi, Mickie James, Becky Lynch, Carmella, and Natalya. This was a quick match. Didn't last very long. This was very late in the show. There were people wondering if it was going to be bumped. I was hoping it wouldn't be bumped, even though I really did by that point want the show to be over, because that would have been... just imagine, these women get bumped from the main card to the pre-show, and people are outraged to the point where they protest online. They get the match moved back to the main card, only for them to get bumped altogether. Can you imagine if that were to happen? How shitty that would have been for these women? So they did send them out there. They had a match. Naomi in her hometown of Orlando got the win. She won the championship back with a new submission hold that I had not seen her use previously that looked pretty painful. And that was it. I mean, there really wasn't a whole lot else to it. Becky Lynch, I got a glimpse of her face up on the screen. She had some weird shit that she was wearing. I don't know what the hell that was. Maybe if you got a better view of it than I did, you can fill me in, because it's just, there was like an audible gasp in our section when they flashed like the shot of her face. It's like, what the hell is that? We couldn't tell. And finally, The Undertaker against Roman Reigns in the main event. The very last minute, we're hearing the ring introductions, and we find out that they've added a no-holds-barred stipulation, just out of nowhere. I don't know if they talked about that on the pre-show or not, but this was the first we had heard of it. And I immediately tweeted out that what it reminded me of was WrestleMania 17. Because you had Steve Austin and The Rock for the WWF Championship, and it was not until Howard Finkel was in the ring announcing the start of the match that we heard him go, and there will be no disqualifications. And you have Jim Ross on commentary with Paul Heyman going, wait a minute, no disqualification? When was that added? It was mass confusion. And of course, in the end, we found out why, because he was using a chair on The Rock and aligning with Vince McMahon and going heel to win the championship. So I heard this and I thought, well, maybe there's a chance, right? I knew better, but I thought to myself, man, maybe they actually have a plan and they're going to get this done right. And they didn't. Not surprisingly. Jim Ross was out there to call the match. This was the match I figured he was going to call. It was very confusing to me when I heard people saying that he was going to be calling the Universal title match. It's like, first of all, why would you even bring Jim Ross to WrestleMania to have him call a match if the match is going to go 5 minutes or less? That's number one. Number two, if this is Undertaker's final match, and there was a lot of speculation about that going in, then it would make sense for Jim Ross, who called many matches from The Undertaker's career, to be there to be able to call his final match. I still wish they would have had him out there to call Shawn Michaels' final match, but they didn't do that. They had Michael Cole and Matt Striker do it at WrestleMania 26. Even though Undertaker and Shawn Michaels, I believe, both lobbied for JR to call that match, Vince McMahon would not relent. And I think JR was there. I think he was up in one of the skyboxes. And Vince just would not have any of it. Because when he's stubborn and he digs his heels in, you can't change his mind. I think that's the story of this whole Roman Reigns push. There's no sense in fighting it because he's not going to change his mind. I'm not talking about the fans. The fans can fight it all they want to. The fans should fight it. If they don't like this guy, then make your voice heard. But I'm talking about, imagine if you work with Vince McMahon, or even if you're someone like Triple H and you're trying to persuade him, and here's a guy who has already made up his mind. What do? Right? Do you piss him off? Do you keep bringing it up? Why do you think a lot of people, you hear these stories, nobody ever speaks up, Vince has all these yes men. Why do you think that is? Why do you think people are afraid to speak their mind in situations like that? They don't want to lose their job. They don't want to get demoted. They don't want to be looked at as not being a team player. But back to Jim Ross for a second. So Jim Ross is out there. And that's one of the things I'm going to want to do when I get home. I have not watched the television version of this pay-per-view yet. But I want to go back and I want to hear Jim Ross's commentary. I'm going to need you guys to sound off, by the way, in the comments down below. How was JR? Because I heard that JBL was talking all over him at different points and would not shut up. And I hope that's not true. I hope that's just an over-exaggeration. But I just haven't had time to go back and watch it myself. But Jim Ross has told FoxSports.com that he has signed a 2-year deal with WWE. So hopefully this is not the final time we get to hear JR calling matches. I would save him for big main events on pay-per-views like WrestleMania, Royal Rumble, SummerSlam. I wouldn't use him week to week. I think in between, what you do with him is you use him for network projects. Give him his own show. Maybe there's some sort of, historical show or something that he can narrate or do. There's a lot of different things you could potentially do with Jim Ross on the WWE Network. Other roles in the company that he could play. So he's signed for 2 years, and I guess we'll see what they have planned for him. Undertaker and Roman Reigns. Undertaker chokeslammed Roman Reigns onto one of the announce tables outside the ring, which did not break. Then there was a spot shortly thereafter where Undertaker climbed up on one of the announce tables at ringside, ended up being speared through the table. There was a chair introduced into the match at one point that Roman picked up and used in a way, again, that reminded me of how Steve Austin beat down The Rock with it at WrestleMania 17 when he turned heel. But there was no heel turn on this night. I do think this heel turn would turn out a lot better for all involved than that one did in 2001. But apparently Vince McMahon disagrees. What can I really say about this match? I really don't have anything positive to say about this match other than, and I know people are going to hate me saying this, but it was the right finish. And I said going in, Undertaker at the Royal Rumble did not look good. He looked slow. He looked very tentative in his movements. He looked a little overweight. Physically, he just did not look like the Undertaker that you and I and everybody else remember and would like to remember the Undertaker for being. And that was just a Royal Rumble. It was not a straight wrestling match. It was not a singles match. He didn't have a lot to do in there, but what he did was not great. And so that didn't exactly inspire a great deal of confidence here when I realized that, holy shit, they're setting up a Roman Reigns-Undertaker match for WrestleMania. I don't want this. I see people, it was that meme on Twitter. It's like a Batman image or something, his head in his hands, like, I don't want this. I didn't want this. And there was no point in the build-up where I had my own coming to Jesus moment where I said, boy, was I wrong. This is great. No. They didn't do anything to get me invested in this match. And in fact, I criticized them on my show last week because I think the build-up to this match was incredibly lazy. This was paint-by-number stuff. If this is The Undertaker's last match, I said this is the laziest build and the least creative build to an Undertaker final match that I have ever seen and that I could have thought of or that you could have thought of. If I turned to you and I said, book me 6 weeks from February to WrestleMania, how you would promote The Undertaker's final match. Are you going to tell me that your build for that match would have looked exactly like what they did? Because if the answer is yes, first of all, thank God you don't write for WWE. But the answer is not going to be yes. You're going to get a lot of different ideas, and a lot of those ideas are, I'm sure, going to be far more creative than what they did. And I think when I said that, some people misconstrued that, well, Undertaker can only do so much, Solomonster. What do you expect him to do? It wasn't that I expected Undertaker to be on television wrestling matches every single week or taking bumps. I was talking about it more in terms of between video packages, between other people or other wrestlers, maybe other legends showing up on the show to talk about The Undertaker, and have The Undertaker himself, even if it's one episode of Raw, come out a few weeks before WrestleMania and talk to us, talk to the people, talk to his creatures of the night like a normal person. Not go out there as Mark Calloway in jeans and a bandana, but just go out there. We know he could talk. We've heard him talk before. We know he's probably got stories to tell. But go out there, whatever story you construct for yourself. If he's going into this knowing it's his last ride, it's his final match, he's out there, he's got something to prove, he should be able to go out there and cut a promo and not go out there and say, I'm digging holes, rest in peace. That's all well and good for all these other years of Undertaker matches that we've seen, but I think they did him a disservice by not coming up with a better story going into what apparently is going to be, most likely, his final match. Now that we know this, now that we see what actually happened here at WrestleMania, I'm every bit as disappointed as I was before, if not more so. And so The Undertaker comes here, and he goes out there, and at the beginning I'm thinking, okay, he doesn't look too bad. He's doing some stuff, and this is okay. But then as the match wears on, he gets a little more tired, he gets a little slower. And it also could just be the match that they booked. Maybe they wanted it that way. The Undertaker at one point was kind of stammering and falling over himself and struggling to get to his feet. He looked like he did in that storyline they did in 2010 when he was supposedly in a vegetative state. And Kane had taken all of his magical powers and he had no energy. He looked like that. When I look at you and I say, you look like you're coming out of a vegetative state, that's not meant as a compliment. Then you got people booing Roman Reigns. They can't shut up with the Roman Reigns boos. They hate his guts so much. And so you have a match that ends up being what we had here, which is, as WrestleMania main events go, one of the worst ones that I've seen. I won't say the worst. It was not the worst. This was not a good main event. This was not a good match. This could have gone on second to last. This would have been a bad match. And the saddest part of this whole thing, Undertaker hit a tombstone, Roman kicked out. It happens all the time now. There was a time, believe it or not, where when somebody kicked out of the tombstone, it meant something. Now it doesn't mean shit. But they were trying a spot, and I've seen them do this in matches before. In fact, I think Undertaker might have done this with Punk at 29, but the best I ever saw Undertaker do it in a match, it was Undertaker and Steve Austin before Austin really started to take off. They had a pay-per-view match in May of 97. And the Hart Foundation was sitting outside the ring, and they ended up getting involved and screwing Austin out of the championship. So Undertaker picked up Austin for a tombstone, and they kind of wiggled around, and then Austin fell backwards, landed on his feet, pulled up the Undertaker into a tombstone of his own. He was going to go for the tombstone, but then Undertaker started to wriggle around. He falls backwards. He picks up Austin. It was this whole sequence that was so hot, and the people were going crazy for it. So I've seen them do this spot before. And I don't want to sit here and lay this all at Undertaker's feet. It's all his fault, or it's all Roman Reigns' fault. I don't know exactly whose fault it was. Frankly, they probably both share some responsibility in this. Probably does fall more on the Undertaker. He just doesn't have that core strength to be able to pull it off. Roman went to pick him up for a tombstone, and they kind of fell down. And what made it worse is they tried it again, and it looked even worse. So they just abandoned the spot altogether. And this is the main event of WrestleMania. This is one of the key spots. You're coming to the conclusion of what may end up being Undertaker's final match. And to watch them botch that move twice was so sad. It was just so sad. In the end, Roman hit a whole bunch of spears on The Undertaker. He kicked out of about 2 or 3 of them. But then the final spear did him in. Undertaker did not kick out. And Roman Reigns pinned The Undertaker with a spear at WrestleMania. Undertaker now, I believe, makes, what does that make him? 23-2, I believe his record is. And again, him and Brock Lesnar share a unique bond now in that they are the only 2 men to hand Undertaker a loss at WrestleMania, and I'm sure that will play into their own WrestleMania main event next year. But when the bell rang and the match was over, and there was another mistimed spot too, where Roman, he looked like the friggin' Ultimate Warrior out. You remember how the Warrior we used to bounce off the ropes, and the guy would be standing there, but he'd run right past him, hit the ropes again and come off, and then hit his crossbody block? Roman did something similar here, where it was something got mistimed, and he hit the ropes, and then Undertaker's kind of standing there, but he's out of position, and so Roman hits the ropes again and comes off, and the whole thing was a fucking mess at the end. And for that to be the lasting image of The Undertaker would have been really sad. If he would have just laid there and that would have been it would have been sad. Thankfully, that's not exactly where the show ended. But it doesn't make it any less sad. I didn't think they had a good match at all. I thought it was a very weak main event. You asked me which was worse, this year's main event or last year's main event. I would say this was worse. I do think last year's main event was a better match, even though it's, again, that was by no means a good WrestleMania main event. But it was just, I hate seeing Undertaker go out like that. That's all I can say. And I really, really, as a fan, I really wish he would have just ended it 3 or 4 years ago. And for that to be the final image of him inside a ring in a match, losing in the way that he did with the botched spots and just looking the way he did, I just think it's just terrible. It's terrible for his career to come to an end like that. Not everybody goes out there and has a 5-star match. With Undertaker, it was never about star ratings and all that shit. But he had a lot of really great matches and classic battles and wars with people. He's a fucking Undertaker, for crying out loud. You know what I mean? Like, this guy's a badass. This guy's he's a warrior. And for him to go out like that, maybe it was all part of the story. I think it's a convenient excuse to say, oh, it was all done that way on purpose with the botches and everything. No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. So Roman wins and he leaves and gets a big pyro celebration. And like I said earlier, you don't have to like him, but you better get used to it because he's not going away. So then we have Undertaker laying on his back in the ring. And he does the zombie sit-up. He gets back to his feet. Everyone's giving him a standing ovation. At this point, I'm not even sure if they're on the air anymore or not. I wasn't even paying attention to that. I'm just watching this play out. And he puts his gear on, he puts his jacket on, he puts his hat on, he goes to leave, he stops himself, he comes back, and he begins to remove various articles of clothing. He takes his gloves off first, he puts his gloves down on the mat. He takes his coat off, he folds it up, he puts it down on the mat. He takes his hat off, he puts the hat on top of the coat. Now we have a stack of Undertaker gear just sitting in the ring. And he's looking out into the crowd, and people are chanting, "Thank you, Taker." There were some people crying. There were people clapping. I wasn't, crying, but there was a formation of a tear in my eyes because I don't know, maybe you had to be there for it. I don't know how it came across on television. I can't say, but being there watching this play out, you knew it was a big moment. You knew that it was a big moment. And I hated that this had to be the match that ends it for him. Botches or not, I just hate that it had to end that way. And it's an emotional thing because, again, I grew up with The Undertaker on television, and he was always there. I feel like for my entire, the entirety of my lifetime as a wrestling fan. I mean, I was a wrestling fan before The Undertaker became a thing, but for the majority of my wrestling fandom, this guy has been around, and he's had a lot of classic matches and classic battles, and he's gone through a lot of different transformations over the years, but the one constant to WWE, when all the other faces and names would change, and from PG and all the different eras and everything in between, the one constant was always The Undertaker. He was always there. And imagine the different generations of locker rooms, the different classes and phases of locker rooms that company has been through over the years, and he's been a part of every single one of them. The guy is an institution. And if you are a fan for any length of time and you were there and it didn't affect you, I find that a little weird. Maybe I shouldn't, right? It's all entertainment. But I don't know. In the moment I'm watching it and I realize this is a big deal. And it clearly meant retirement because taking the gloves off and everything else, sometimes you'll take, it's the boots. They kind of leave their boots in the ring. I mean, that's what it's a sign of. Doesn't mean he can't come back, I guess, but after what they did last night, I don't think he should. Based on the way he looked, I don't think he should. But after what they did, this was the perfect send-off, what they did after the match. The way that the Undertaker kind of disrobed, and that sounds lewd, but and then left the ring to a standing ovation. I love how he only went up the ramp a little bit because it's 80 fucking yards. The guy's not going to walk to the back. But he's standing there, and that trap door in the floor where he raised when he did his entrance, he stood there, he raised his fist in the air, and he slowly, and I love the visual of it, which I assume was intentional. The Undertaker goes back down to the depths of hell. And I've always gotten questions from the mailbag, people asking me, how would you end it for The Undertaker? And I said to someone once, it would be in a puff of smoke. He would be in the ring at WrestleMania after a win, a loss, probably a win, because I never would have broken the streak. But then there's a lightning bolt, something happens, he gets out of the ring real quick so you don't see him, and when the lights come on or the smoke clears or what have you, he's gone. And we just don't see him again, not until the Hall of Fame. We don't see The Undertaker ever again. It would be an Undertaker-esque way for his career to end. They didn't do that here, but this was very well done. And I could tell you from being inside that stadium that there were a lot of people who did not have a dry eye when that show was over. It felt like a funeral. Like, literally felt like a funeral. And they had the gong and the gong and the gong, and then the show just ends. And I thought, forget the match for a second. As an ending to The Undertaker's career, him walking off the way he did there and the way that whole thing played out, I thought it was perfect. I thought it was perfect. And that's it. That's WrestleMania. It's a long show. I didn't expect this review to go this long. Usually my pay-per-view recaps are about half an hour, but there was a lot to cover here on this show, and it's a very polarizing show. It really isn't if you look at our poll, because we've got a lot of people voting in our poll, and again, it's an overwhelmingly positive reaction, but I'm looking at the feedback on other YouTube channels and on Twitter and in our Facebook group, and there's a lot of people who thought this was a bad WrestleMania. This was not a bad WrestleMania. This was not a perfect WrestleMania, but I thought that this was, overall, a very entertaining, very enjoyable show with a lot of memorable moments, if that's what you're into. If you're into WrestleMania moments and newsworthy stuff, the Hardys came back, the proposal. I mean, there was a lot of stuff that happened. They just have to make sure they don't go this long again. I know some of those New Japan Tokyo Dome shows go 6-7 hours. I don't know how they do that. I really don't. There's no reason for the show to go that long. They should never, ever do that again. It's not fair to the people in the stadium. On the one hand, you could say you're getting your money's worth. That's not the point. You can give me my money's worth in 3 or 4 hours. You can gladly have my money if you give me a good show in 3 or 4 hours. This company needs to learn less is more. I feel like everything from the lengths of these pay-per-views, the length of Raw, the length of this, the length of that, everything is supersized lately, and they have to just kind of calm down a little bit. Less is more. Maybe not everybody has to be on the WrestleMania card. I know it sucks for them, but, not everybody has to get a participation award here. Sometimes it just makes for a better show when you have less stuff on the show. That would be my message to them. But 7 out of 10, I feel comfortable going for this WrestleMania. I can't say 8, but I do feel that it is worthy of a 7. I know I didn't do a review on NXT TakeOver. Real quick, I thought that was a good show as well. Not anything close to one of the best TakeOver shows I've ever seen, but that tag team match was just off the charts. The last 5 minutes or so were kind of dead because people were shocked when DIY was eliminated when they were, and it came down to the 2 heel tag teams. But the majority of that tag team match was just phenomenal. The women's match I thought was good. Clearly they're building to something more with her and Ember Moon. And the main event also, I thought it started out, it was kind of boring and it was dragging a little bit, but it really built up nicely. And Bobby Roode got the clean win over Nakamura. That tells me Nakamura's on his way up, possibly in the next day or two. The big news coming out of the TakeOver show wasn't that Bobby Roode retained, it was that Drew McIntyre is back. Anthem's loss is WWE's gain, and I kind of posted on Twitter, but it's true. If you have a contract offer on the table that you want to present to somebody, if you have somebody who you want to sign to a contract and you feel could really bring value to your company, then you better send them their fucking contract and not drag your feet, because if you do, you might lose out. And according to Drew McIntyre anyway, that's exactly what happened here. That's the only reason that he is back with WWE now as part of the NXT brand, is because Anthem waited 3 weeks too long to send him a contract. And it's amazing how things can change. Had he signed that contract, he'd be the TNA champion right now. He'd be the Impact Wrestling World Champion right now, and not whoever has the title now, Bobby Lashley or did they take the title off of Del Rio? I know Del Rio won it, but then I think maybe he gave it back. I don't know what happened there. The point is, he is back with WWE. He is part of the NXT brand. That's exactly where he should be. If he goes to Raw, I have no doubt that Vince McMahon would reunite him and Jinder Mahal, and that I don't want to see. And so for him to be back and to be back in NXT is a good fit for him, and hopefully this time they'll get it right, and they'll be able to get the most out of him that they can get, because he's a young guy still. He's a talented guy. He deserves better than the hand he was dealt last time. Now they can make up for it. They can make some money with the guy. I'm happy for him, and I'm happy that they have some more new blood on NXT. Thank you to everybody who helped make this weekend amazing for me. I want to say thank you to Damian Nelson from the Pro Wrestling Report, the whole crew from the Fight TV app, and what we were able to do at WrestleCon. I got to interview a whole bunch of different wrestlers and legends, and all of those video interviews are up in the Fight TV app, FITE. It's a free app. If you find the Pro Wrestling Report WrestleCon coverage, it's divided into 2 parts. Interviews with Billy Gunn, Demolition, Jimmy Hart, and the Mountie, and Daniels and Kazarian, ODB, Gail Kim, Christy Hemme, just a whole bunch. And Mean Gene Okerlund, which I'm still on cloud 9. I was able to get that interview with him. So from all of that to the Sound Off fan meetup that we had on Sunday before WrestleMania, I was expecting a good number of people to come out, but I was not expecting that. We had a ton of people who made their way out. I got to meet so many of you and take a lot of pictures, and it was just so much fun. And the people who spotted me at the various events and WrestleMania, just a hearty, sincere thank you to everyone. And New Orleans next year is going to be wild. I cannot wait to see all of you down there so we can do it all over again. Follow me on Twitter at Solomonster. You can still vote in our poll. Follow me along as I live tweet during Raw each week and all the various pay-per-views. And so until next time, that's going to do it for this edition of Sound of Extra, WrestleMania 33 review. We'll be back soon with a brand new extra here on YouTube. So until then, be well, stay safe, have yourselves a tremendous week, and we will see you back here on the channel real soon. Until then, take care, guys.